Ready for another one of them tales about the end of humanity? Well, here goes. Look around. See the world out there. Well, it's about to change forever. Think of wars, famine, disease, and worldwide turmoil. That's what's coming down as we pass a nasty spike in the statistics called the oil peak. In fact, we may just have passed it already. The Great Depression was fun, but here's peak oil. They call it Economic Hiroshima, and frankly, that's an understatement, suggesting just a local catastrophe that will be gone soon. Well, not this Hiroshima. It will last decades and change our world forever, and it will not only affect the city of Hiroshima, the impending crisis could throw the entire globe back into the Middle Ages. And in fact, that's not even the main reason why the oil crash is one of the ugliest scenarios you'll find on this site. The real bad thing is that the oil crash is going to happen, period. Left wing and right wing, conservative, progressive, scientists and politicians all agree that the crisis is inevitable. In fact, the oil crash may have already begun. As I speak these words, the U.S. has conquered the oil wells called Iraq, and the oil price is at an all-time high of over $40 per barrel. This looks bad, folks. It isn't hard to explain what the trouble is all about. The oil peak is the point where the world's oil supplies are exactly half used up. Yes, I felt some relief when I heard that for the first time, too. Apparently, all these decades of industry and cars, we've still got half our oil supplies left. Put precisely, we started out with an estimated total of about 2 trillion barrels. And in 2003, some 900 billion of it had been used. But here's the downside. When an oil well is half empty, you'll have to go through an increasingly amount of trouble to get the last bit up. Think of it like eating yogurt out of a carton. At first, you'll have no trouble bringing out spoonfuls of yogurt at all. But after a while, you'll have to carefully maneuver your spoon around along the sides and corners of the carton to bring the last bit out. In oil wells, it goes about the same way. So when half the oil of the world is used up, the price per barrel will begin to rise. The prices will steadily go up about 1 to 5% a year. But meanwhile, world oil demand is on the rise. Currently, the entire world consumes about 75 million barrels a day, or 25 billion barrels a day. But in 10 years' time, demand is expected to rise more than two-thirds to 135 million barrels a day. So, when half of all the oil in the world is used up, the price per barrel will also begin to rise. The prices will steadily go up with about 1 to 5% a year. But meanwhile, world demand for oil is also up. Currently, the entire world consumes about 75 million barrels a day, or 25 billion barrels per year. But in 10 years' time, demand is expected to rise by more than two-thirds, to 135 million barrels a day. Obviously, there's a gap here. We'll have an oil crisis. According to some estimates, the price of the barrel of oil will increase, don't look now, 5 to 6-fold in only a few years' time, to prices that go up to $200 per barrel. This will unleash a worldwide economic crisis beyond imagination, making the Great Depression of the 30s look like a fun time. The real problem, of course, is that our society is addicted to cheap, abundant oil. Our cars, airplanes, ships, they all run on oil. Our electricity is generated in oil-fueled power plants. The stuff you buy in the stores is brought there by trucks that run on oil. In the end, literally everything is to some degree made of oil. So, when oil gets expensive, so does our world. Even seemingly innocent things like socks, drinking water, and bread will become very expensive. Factories and businesses will go bankrupt. Unemployment will explode, pushing up the state deficit and deepening the crisis even more. Banks will shut down, thereby killing the savings of their clients. In the end, the oil peak will send massive shockwaves throughout the world's economies. If you're an American, your problems are even worse. The U.S. economy is particularly vulnerable to all oil problems. Not just because the U.S. consumes so much oil, but also because the oil trade worldwide goes in dollars. Consequently, when the oil trade hampers, the U.S. economy takes a plunge. But you don't want to live in one of the developing countries either. South America and Africa are very vulnerable to oil crisis too, because their economies are weak as they are already. The peak oil will trigger an instant and sharp crisis in the third world, causing even more wars, famines, death. So, if it's all that bad, we just turn to some other kind of energy, right? We have windmills, solar cells, and everything will be cool again, you say. Well, actually, that won't work. The problem is, at the moment, there just are no real alternatives. Take wind energy, for instance. Wind is obviously stuff that doesn't contain a lot of energy. Just compare slamming your head into a bit of wind with slamming it into a concrete wall. And what's more, to build windmills, you'll have to weld steel, drive all kinds of stuff and engineers around in trucks and cars, build factories and make thousands of components. In the end, it will cost more energy, oil, to actually build a windmill than the windmill will ever generate during its entire lifetime. Roughly the same goes for other so-called alternatives like solar cells, hydrogen energy, biomass energy, and what have you. They all cost more energy / oil than they produce. The only realistic alternatives to are gas and nuclear power, but gas also runs out, and it doesn't help that we're closing down many of our nuclear power plants. Nuclear fusion, perhaps? Indeed, that would be a good, clean alternative to oil, but the problem here is the technology just isn't ready yet. We need to do more research. After all, you don't want to risk blowing up part of the planet in an all too hastily done fusion experiment. You wanted energy? Here, have some. Kaboom! And of course, when it comes to the alternatives, we still got this world here that is hooked on oil. Our cars run on gasoline. That's not on electricity. So we need to replace all of our cars and rebuild and rewire most of the stuff our society has before we can use nuclear fusion or a nuclear plant. And that takes a lot of the black stuff, oil. But hold it now, you say. We've faced oil crisis before, haven't we? Indeed, in 1973 and in 1979. The flow of oil hampered too, plunging the world economy into a crisis instantaneously. But back then, it was all easy. Venezuela just pushed up their oil production a bit, and presto, cheap oil was back again. This time, it's going to be different. Once we've passed the oil peak, there will be no cavalry to help us out. Every oil-producing country faces the same problem. We'll have to go to Turkey. We'll have to go cold turkey on our oil addiction. That's just the way it is. By now, you'll probably see how immensely complicated and big the problem really is. And we've only given you a few broader pictures. We haven't detailed the wars, the turmoil, the oil peak will inevitably unleash. We haven't elaborated on the fact that all experts agree we won't find any new oil fields. The question is not, but rather when the crisis will strike. The ever-optimistic oil industry says approximately 2020, giving us some head start to test those nuclear fusion stations and replace our cars, but most economists agree we will reach the oil peak sometime over the next few years, before 2010. The leading association for the study of peak oil, ASPO, calculates 2017 will be the year. But in fact, there are some disturbing signs the crisis has begun already. Obviously, the oil price is in trouble. Just like the newspapers, it goes up and down like a roller coaster. This is exactly what experts predicted would happen right before peak oil. But surely there's some way out. A comforting punchline or soothing concluding remark. Actually, we're at a loss here. Looks like we have to brace ourselves and face the big one this time. We'll see death and destruction, and we'll see our world change forever. Can't say we're looking forward to it either. And even then, we have to have some luck. There's a particularly nasty glitch in the theories even the economists don't know about. For in fact, the biggest risk we're facing is not even the oil crisis itself, but rather the invention of some kind of new energy source. Say we all stopped using oil tomorrow. That would mean suddenly we'd stop putting huge amounts of carbon dioxide into our atmosphere. Now, this is probably not a good idea. Over the years, we've got huge amounts of green plants, plankton, and algae on our planet, courtesy of the greenhouse effect. If we suddenly stop producing greenhouse gases, these plants and algae will suck all the carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. This will kickstart an instant ice age, as our planet will be robbed from its protective carbon dioxide coat. The Earth would freeze over and would turn into a huge snowball. Now, who wants to have an ice age without any heating to keep us warm?